Hey everyone. Hope you're well. I'm sorry it's been a while since I've done a podcast. I have had a virus and my son had a virus and then his father had a virus. So it's been almost a month, I think, since I have put out any content. And I apologize for that, but we are gonna jump straight back into it. Like I said in the last video, that my next video was going to be on reading from the same book, Jihad and Sharia Law. So a lot of people will say, apologists of Islam will try to tell the Westerner that we don't know what jihad is, and jihad is an internal struggle. That actually is jihad in itself, and you will soon see why when I read out word for word what is in this book by Bill Warner, Sharia Law for Non-Muslims.
Islamic jihad is to fight or struggle for the sake of Islam, and that struggle can take many different forms. My favorite is my daily struggle to break myself away from the distractions of this world to pray on time every day.
So, Jihad and Sharia Law. 09.0 Jihad. Jihad means war against kafirs to establish Islam's Sharia law. Quran 2:216. You are commanded to fight, although you dislike it. You may hate something that is good for you and love something that is bad for you. Allah knows and you do not. This is a verse we've already covered for another subject, but it's definitely relatable here. Quran 4:8-9. They would have you become kafirs like them, so you will all be the same. Therefore, do not take any of them as friends until they have abandoned their homes to fight for Allah, for Allah's cause, bracket, jihad, unbracket. But if they turn back, find them and kill them wherever they are. The whole world must submit to Islam. Kafirs are the enemy because they are not Muslim. Violence and terror are made sacred by the Quran. Peace comes only with submission to Islam. I saw this video of this Australian girl traveling in Afghanistan, and she's just like, oh my God, that's so sweet, that's so nice, that's so kind, that's so this, that's so that, the whole way through the video, and I just wanted to like fucking vomit in my mouth. Because for one, she had a tour guide, a male tour guide, and for two, she had a male with her. I don't know if it was her boyfriend or just her friend, but she had two males with her, and she obviously knew nothing about Islam, and especially how the women are treated in Afghanistan. Recently, they have had their voices even taken away. They're not even allowed to speak to each other in the public domain.
Afghan women are now banned from showing their faces or speaking out loud in public, and they can't even look at a man they're not related to. It's part of a new law passed by the Taliban, the hardline Islamic group that has ruled Afghanistan since Western forces left in 2021. The rules say a woman must cover her body and face in public to avoid tempting others. They also ban women from singing or reading aloud in public and make it illegal for anyone to play music. The Taliban government says the law will help promote virtue and eliminate vice. Girls have also been banned from secondary schools since 2021, just 1 month after the Taliban took control. The Taliban said a few months later that it would lift the ban once it had secured principles of Islamic law and Afghan culture. But nearly 3 years on, girls still aren't back in the class.
The adopted law on the promotion of virtue and the prevention of vice by the de facto authorities in Afghanistan cements policies that completely erase women's presence in public, silencing their voices and depriving them of their individual autonomy, effectively attempting to render them into faceless, voiceless shadows. This is utterly intolerable. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk calls for this egregious law to be immediately repealed. The long list of repressive provisions that this law imposes on women reinforces a number of existing restrictions that violate their fundamental human rights, including their freedom of movement, their freedom of expression, and their right to live free from discrimination. The law includes a requirement to wear clothes that completely cover their bodies from head to toe, including their faces, a ban for transport providers on transporting women unless they're accompanied by a male relative, and a prohibition on women's voices being heard in public. Disempowering and rendering invisible and voiceless half the population of Afghanistan will only worsen the human rights and humanitarian crisis in the country.
So yeah, these travelers that go to Islamic nations and they come out saying, oh, it was so great, it was so peaceful, I don't know what all the fuss is about, I think everybody's just Islamophobic. Well, actually, they have probably had either a tour guide with them, they were either male, or they had males with them if they were females. There are plenty of cases of single females going to these Islamic nations by themselves, being raped and killed. And they don't get any justice. Their families don't get any justice because that is the law there, okay? That is the Sharia law there. They are infidels, they are kafirs, and they are to be waged war and jihad against.
Cuando estamos en el hospital.
Nos ha pasado algo que no deseamos a nadie.
Nos han asaltado en la tienda, nos han golpeado, nos han puesto el cuchillo en el cuello que me iban a matar, y a Fernanda la han violado. 7 tíos, hijos de puta.
Pues bueno, ya os contaremos más.
Contaremos más.
Vamos a ver qué tal. Estamos con la policía.
Hemos ido a un hospital allí.
Aquí en India.
Hemos dormido en un hospital allí, nos han dejado dormir allí. Hemos metido la moto dentro del hospital y ahora nos han traído a unos 60, 70 kilómetros a otra ciudad, a otro hospital para hacer las pruebas del ADN de Fernanda y todo. Bueno, ya está.
So I just shake my head, even with my friends that, like, you know, go to Turkey or other Islamic nations and can't even admit to themselves that they know something's off and they know something's not right, but they just don't even care. They don't care. They don't really want to know. They might notice if they're females that the males are forceful and aggressive, but they don't know why, because they've never done any research into the Quran, the Hadith, or the Sira, or Sharia law for themselves. I was one of these, okay? I've been to 4 Muslim nations, but I went to the democratic nations. I went to Indonesia, which is a democratic Islamic nation. I went to Turkey, which is, well, not so much now, but it is a democratic, it was at the time a democratic Islamic nation. Morocco. And what was the 4th one? Oh, Malaysia. Malaysia was my least favorite country out of all 30 countries, and it wasn't because of anything like violence that I experienced. It was the vibe, the energy. Everybody was fucking miserable, okay? It's not just bad. Sharia law is not just bad for the kafirs. It's also bad for the Muslims, and they will tell you that themselves if they're based. If they're honest, they will tell you that for themselves. And I'm going to put at least a little short of a video from an Egyptian woman speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood, who I will cover a little bit later, but they probably waged the most jihad against the West in the entire world, and the way that they do it is they do it through the school systems. They get a hold of the minds of the young men, and as we all know, we are all very ideological when we are young, when we're teenagers, and you know, I used to be on the left when I was in my teens, because that's what the universities teach us all to be like. You know, altruistic, at our own expense, especially if we're Western and Europeans, and especially if European/white. But anyway, let's stick with this topic. I'm going to read some more here. So, jihad is universal and eternal. Muslim 001,0031 from the Hadiths. Muhammad, I have been ordered, quote, I have been ordered to wage war against mankind until they accept that there is no God but Allah, and that they believe I am his prophet and accept all revelations spoken through me. When they do these things, I will protect their lives and property unless otherwise justified by Sharia, in which case their fate lies in Allah's hands. So again, there will be no peace for mankind until they submit to Islam, to Muhammad, and to the fact that the only God is Allah. Sahih Bukhari 4,52,142. Muhammad, quote, to battle kafirs in jihad for even one day is greater than the entire earth and everything on it. A spot in paradise smaller than your riding crop is greater than that of the entire earth and everything on it. A day or a night's travel in jihad is greater than the entire world and everything on it. Unquote. 09.1. The obligatory character of jihad. Jihad is a communal obligation. When enough people perform it, enough Muslims perform it, it is no longer obligatory upon other Muslims. And that is why you will find not many, if any, Muslims that condemn the grooming gangs or any violence against kafirs. You ask them to condemn the violence against kafirs and they won't, because they don't want to commit the violence. They want the rest of their community to do it for them, because it is a communal obligation. If somebody else is doing it for them, then they don't have to do it themselves. Plus, they can't condemn anything against Islam because it's punishable. Quran 495. Believers who stay at home in safety, other than those who are disabled, are not equal to those who fight for their wealth and their lives for Allah's cause, bracket, jihad, unbracket. Sahih Bukhari 4,52,96. Muhammad, quote, anyone who arms a jihadist is rewarded just as a fighter would be. Anyone who gives proper care to a holy warrior's dependents is rewarded just as a fighter would be. So you can just tell from that there's different forms of jihad, which is what is so important about this chapter. It's not what those apologists tell you. It's not an internal struggle. It's all kinds of different things. It can be just giving food or shelter to a jihadist's 4 wives or 22 children, or one of his wives or one of his children, as Sahih Bukhari just explained in 45296 of the Hadiths.
We're at a time in history when there has been a jihad in Paris, followed by a jihad in San Bernardino. But of course we don't read about jihad in the media, we hear about terrorism. Well, terrorism is the wrong word to use because there's an entire doctrine of jihad. There's the jihad of murder, which we've experienced in San Bernardino and Paris, the jihad of speech, the jihad of writing, and the jihad of money. The jihad of murder is not going to take us down as a civilization, but the jihad of money, speech, and writing will take us down the road to Sharia, and Sharia annihilates a civilization. So the terror jihad we're worried about is fewer than the drownings that we have in America. So that is not going to take us down. How does this other jihad hurt us? Well, let me give you some examples. Here in Tennessee, we have the textbooks are being rewritten such that Islam is a glorious golden age, the most wonderful civilization in the world. Whatever truth there may be in that, Everything about Islam in these textbooks is a half-truth. Now what's worse about these half-truths is they cannot be challenged, because you see under the Sharia the doctrine of Islam is not to be discussed by the kafir, the non-Muslim. So the jihad being waged through the writing in textbooks is harming us far more than the one jihad we've had here in Tennessee. Well, there's been two actually. But the jihad of murder is not taking down an entire generation of students. Then we have the jihad in the universities, where it's jihad of the money. Georgetown University, for instance, is owned by the Saudis. Many other university departments have sold out to varying degrees as well. Having spent 8 years in the university, let me assure you that not only can you rent a department, you can buy a department. And that is being done in the universities across America. That jihad is far worse because it brings about the Sharia, which means we are prohibited from having an open and honest discussion about Islam. Then we have another kind of jihad of speech that is occurring here in Tennessee, and it occurs across the United States. They're called religious dialogues. Now that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? We'll get together, we'll talk. But you see there's some rules to these religious dialogues when the minister, the rabbi, and the Muslim get together, and that is nothing will be said that will cause any kind of discomfort by the Muslim. So these are not debates or real honest discussions. These are all make nice. This is a form of jihad because Christianity and Judaism are being subjugated by the Sharia, by the jihad of speech and by the jihad of the pen. So terror, the jihad of murder, is not a serious challenge to our civilization. Now, by the way, I'm not minimizing the suffering by the individuals and their families, but as a civilization, we're not being harmed by the jihad of murder. It is the jihad of writing, the jihad of speech, the jihad of money. That is what will kill a civilization, and that's what the headline should be about. How we're losing our ability to teach and learn about Islam in the schools, and including the grade schools of America. Thank you.
Who is obliged to fight in jihad? 09.4 from Reliance of the Traveller. All sane, able-bodied men who have reached puberty. That is a massive, revealing, little sentence there, isn't it? Because it explains why we have seen the rise in rape, the rise in murder, the rise in crime skyrocket through the roof in Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, all of the Western nations who have taken in hundreds of thousands of refugees from Islamic nations. They ain't here to be peaceful. They're here doing what their religion tells them they need to do, which is jihad against all kafirs. Whether that is Hindu, whether that is Christian, Jewish, pagan, polytheist, whatever, animist, whatever you are, atheist, you're still a kafir. To Islamists, you're a kafir, and you deserve to be jihaded against.
In the year 2000, there were 7,801 rapes reported across England and Wales. In the year 2024, the amount of rapes reported across England and Wales is 71,227. That is an 813% increase. What happened? Mass migration. Did you know that in the UK, Afghan migrants are 22 times more likely to be convicted of a sexual crime than British nationals? Mass migration and tolerance of other cultures is a lie taught to you by leftists to remain in power. It is good for no one.
Because you don't submit to Islam and Muhammad. The objectives of jihad. 09.8 from Reliance of the Traveller. The Caliphate, bracket, supreme ruler, who is both a king and similar to a pope, unbracket, makes war on the Jews and Christians. First invite them to Islam, then invite them to pay the jizya, tax on kafirs. The tax on kafirs is the jizya, as I have already covered in a previous video. If you haven't seen that, go back and check it out. If they reject conversion and the jizya, the tax upon kafirs, then attack them. Quran 9:29. Make war on those who received the scriptures, Jews and Christians, but do not believe in Allah or in the last day. They do not forbid what Allah and His Messenger has forbidden. The Christians and Jews do not follow the religion of truth until they submit and pay the poll tax, the jizya, and feel themselves humiliated. 09.9. And I just want to add to that, if you're not a Jew or if you're not a Christian, you don't get a chance to even pay the tax, okay? You are murdered. You're gone. Off with your head. And much worse. Tortured to death. The caliphates fight all other peoples, kafirs, until they become Muslims. 09.9 of Reliance of the Traveller. The spoils of war. 010.2. Anyone who kills or incapacitates, cuts off a head of a kafir, can take whatever he can. Sahih Bukhari 4,53,351. Muhammad, Allah has made it legal for me to take spoils of war, and those, unquote, and those spoils of war include women, who they put into sex slavery, and that is how they make their fucking money. Horrific, violent, brutal, backwards, cave-dwelling fucking rules that they want to bring into our nations in 2025. They want to bring this for us to obey and submit to. And that is why we need to know what Sharia law really is. Quran 8:4-1. Know that a fifth of all your spoils of war, bracket, the traditional cut for the leader was a fourth, unbracket, belonged to Allah and His Messenger. That's convenient, isn't it, Muhammad? To the Messenger's family, the orphans and the needy travellers. Now just remember, the orphans are only Islamic orphans. They're not concerned about giving charity to kafirs, if you haven't already noticed, if you haven't already picked up. And And since jihad can be done by Muslims against any kafir, with the proper motivation, theft from a kafir is jihad. Even something as simple as stealing your phone, which has happened to me in a park in Spain by an Islamic migrant. He stole my phone. Even that is jihad in their eyes. Dying in jihad, martyrdom. A Muslim martyr is one who kills for Allah and Islam. But his killing must be pure and devoted to Allah. If his motivation is pure, then the jihadist will achieve paradise or be able to take the wealth of a kafir. Sahih Bukhari 1,2,35. Muhammad said, quote, "The man who joins jihad, compelled by nothing except sincere belief in Allah and his Prophet, and survives, will be rewarded by Allah either in the afterlife or with the spoils of war. If he is killed in battle and dies a martyr, he will be admitted to paradise."
किसके खिलाफ? तो अगर कोई कुरान नहीं पढ़ता, इस्लाम नहीं करता, तो वो दुश्मन है, उसको मार देना चाहिए।
करने के बाद इंशाल्लाह ताला फिर हज आजाद।
और कुछ नहीं करना जिंदगी में, कोई ख्वाब नहीं है तुम्हारे?
जान में शहीद हो गया तो अगर नहीं शहीद हो गया, अगर जान में शहीद हो गया तो फिर नहीं हो सकती।
Indoctrinated from the age of 8. Some seem to be in a trance. Mostly from disadvantaged backgrounds, these boys are placed here by families, unable to take care of them.
Holy war in Islam. It's jihad. This may be a surprise to many who grew up in the West, especially those who were born or grew up post 9/11, because of the growing number of the munafiqeen who are spreading the American Zionist Islam. And it has nothing to do with Islam. That version of Islam is an Islam that suits the enemies. The one who's been spreading that there's no holy war in Islam has been defecating zandaqa out of his mouth for the past 20 years, downplaying the legislation of Allah and the hudud. The Muslims in the West, especially the youth in the West, especially the youth in America, need to wake up. The current events are a wake-up call for Muslims to start normalizing mentioning jihad's proper meaning and putting it back into their vocabulary. Jihad must be a common, normal term on the tongues and on your social media and in the masajid and elsewhere. It's time the mothers nurse their infants with the love of jihad and the ambition of wanting to become a mujahid and a shaheed. It's about time the youth brag about the teachings of jihad that are in the Quran and in the Sunnah and in the Seerah. Biden's a terrorist. You've seen that senile Fir'aun of our time. He lost his mind of everything except his loyalty and support to the Yahudi occupiers. The US is more to blame for the genocide in Palestine than the occupying Yahud. Netanyahu is no more than a dog for Biden, just like the Arab leaders are dogs for Netanyahu. Leaders who brought the filthy tarfih, the entertainments and concerts into Bilad al-Haramain while the people of Gaza were being massacred. They replaced the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and beloyed the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave permission for those transgressed and to defend themselves. They don't need the permission of any filthy ruler in the UAE or the filthy rulers in Bilad al-Haramain. It's about time the Muslims, especially the youth in the West, It's time for them to understand what should already be known, that the kafir West, particularly the US, are enemies of Muslims. America is a vicious enemy of Muslims. If you can't raise your child telling him you want him to grow up to be a mujahid and a shaheed, then you're the root of the problem. Rawafid don't ever bring victory to Muslims. If there's any treacherous traitor worse than the Yahud, it would be the Rawafid.
Quran 61:10. Believers, should I show you a profitable exchange that will keep you from severe torment? Believe in Allah and His Messenger and fight valiantly for Allah's cause. Quote, unquote, jihad. With both your wealth and your lives. It would be better for you if only you knew it.
In the Quran and the Sunnah, there's lots of verses that reference fighting and military campaigns and what to do with the enemy and what to do with the person you're doing pacts with and so on and so forth. Now, some of that might not be applicable to our everyday lives now.
And if we fight you, then we capture you, you become our slaves, and we take your land. This is the strength of Islam. But nowadays, forget this. Maybe in the coming 40, 50 years when the Muslims become strong as they're supposed to be.
Muslims should not concede or compromise with people when we have the higher ground or we have the upper ground. And there's actually an amazing ayah in the Quran, ayah 139 in Surah Al-Imran. To be honest with you, Islam has the upper hand. Okay? We're not going to give you that concession.
حنفرض أحكام الإسلام على البلد الذي دخلناه. أحكام الإسلام بتقول إن كل الناس الموجودين في البلد أصبحوا غنائم وسبايا. نساء، رجال، أطفال، أموال، دور، حقول، مزارع، كل دي بقت ملك الدولة الإسلامية.
I've been commanded to fight people until they testify that there's no God but Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they have saved their blood and their possessions from me. And if they didn't, well, your blood will flow and your possessions will be taken.
Of these very, 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 very wealthy sheikhs in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East that give $10 million, tens of millions of dollars to Iran, to Palestine, to ISIS, Hezbollah, all these different jihadist groups, Islamic jihadist groups, the Muslim Brotherhood, woohoo, that's a massive one. Or even giving money to universities in the West to create a prayer room for Muslims, to put Muslim books in our Western curriculum is a form of jihad and is rewarded by Allah by sending these guys to paradise. They don't have to get their hands dirty. They don't have to jihad by the sword. They jihad with their wealth. So don't let anybody ever tell you that they are altruistic. They always have an ulterior motive, and that is to further the cause of Islam, which wants to take over the entire world.
And I want to thank you because you've agreed to invest $600 billion into the United States. And because he's my friend, he might make it $1 trillion, but I'm going to have to work on him. But it's 600. We can count on 600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher. Yes, sir. I don't know. We'll see. But we appreciate it very much. So Saudi is going to be investing at least $600 billion, and that means investments in plants, in companies, money on Wall Street, and what it really means for everybody that really counts is jobs, a lot of jobs. We have a lot of jobs. So I just want to thank you. We've been really good friends for a long period of time. We've always been on the same side of every issue.
With both your wealth and your lives, it would be better for you if only you knew. Those are the words of Allah, as spoken by Muhammad in the Quran, verse 61:10. It would be better for you if only you knew. It will keep you from severe torment if you jihad with your wealth or your life. This is what they're taught.
Fresh off winning the presidential election, Donald Trump appeared at a UFC event, flanked by bullet-headed UFC CEO Dana White and Elon Musk, who had just spent $270 million electing Trump. But there was another person there who wielded as much influence and wealth as pretty much anyone alive. Yasser al-Rumayyan, the head of the Public Investment Fund, the Saudi state-run sovereign wealth fund, which controls about $930 billion. Al-Rumayyan could claim some degree of ownership of practically everyone and everything around him that November night. From UFC, which was planning some splashy events for Saudi Arabia, to Elon Musk, whose companies had long been recipients of Saudi investment capital, and Trump himself, a stalwart Saudi ally whose political, economic, and family interests had come to depend on Saudi largesse.
It's clear that Saudi Arabia has been investing in Trump and Trump world for a long time.
I love the Saudis. Many are in this building.
Lobbyists representing the Saudi government paid for an estimated 500 rooms at President Trump's D.C. hotel.
The Live Golf Invitational.
The Saudi-backed golf tour.
At the Trump National Doral.
Have a good time, everybody. They buy apartments from me. They spend $40 million, $50 million.
Trump Tower, Jeddah.
Am I supposed to dislike them? I like them very much.
And foreign governments, they understand. They're dealing with the transactional president.
Crown Prince, thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
And now, as we head into a second Trump administration, the question is, what more do they want?
How would you describe the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia?
I think it's fine, but with me it will be G-R-E-A-T, great.
The host of the FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia.
What we're seeing with Saudi Arabia is unprecedented because of the sheer amount of money that they've put in.
Kareem Zidane is an investigative sports journalist.
They're investing in absolutely everything.
Al-Rumayyan's appearance at the UFC fight wasn't just about Trump. Sports have become a key part of Saudi Arabia's investment and influence peddling strategy. Kareem and his colleagues at Play of the Game mapped over 910 sponsorships from Saudi entities in 2024 across the globe. There's the ownership of the Premier League's Newcastle United, the creation of Live Golf, a competitor to the PGA Tour, sponsorship for the Women's Tennis Association, backing Formula One's Aston Martin. There's MMA, esports, equestrianism, wrestling, cycling, billiards, and a potential new venture into boxing.
As a matter of fact, it might be easier to list the sports that Saudi Arabia hasn't invested in. Honestly, I can't think of one at the moment.
The Saudis would call it investing. Others call it sports washing.
Sports washing is the deployment of sports as a means of reputation laundering. When countries use sports and major sports events, for example, to distract from human rights abuses. When Saudi Arabia invests in sports, it's really looking for geopolitical influence. It's looking to recraft its own global image. It might not reap the most significant monetary returns, but I don't think that's what they're interested in from sports. They're looking at influence, and I think they're doing a damn good job about it, as much as I don't want to say that.
And this is happening with other Saudi investments too.
What's your take on the unabashed expansion of the Saudi Investment Fund into Silicon Valley?
In 2016, then Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, made a well-publicized trip to Silicon Valley. By 2018, Saudi Arabia was the single largest investor in US startups. But where was that money going, and what was it doing? Let me give you an example. Twitter. When Twitter was a public firm, the Saudi Kingdom Holding Company was its largest outside shareholder, owning a bigger part than even co-founder and longtime CEO Jack Dorsey. But it wasn't just a financial relationship, as I've covered in my reporting. Twitter has long been an important place for the Saudi government to propagandize on behalf of MBS's economic program, flood Saudi-related discussions with posts from pro-regime trolls, and track and harass dissidents, some of whom have been doxxed, arrested, and tortured. In 2014, Twitter's leadership learned that a key MBS advisor was running a spy ring inside Twitter's San Francisco headquarters. Twitter never publicly accounted for its role in fostering the Saudi spy ring. Jack Dorsey enjoyed a chummy meeting with MBS just 6 months after the Twitter CEO had been told by the FBI that his company had an espionage problem. They weaponized their investment, used it to spy on, target, and harass critics, and they did it all without any consequences. And their investment continues today.
Let's fight.
So back to the fight. And another guest, Elon Musk. When Twitter went private under Musk, Kingdom Holding Company rolled its shares into the new private entity and became its second largest investor after Musk. But Twitter wasn't the only tech giant receiving backing from the Saudis. In April 2023, Sanibel, the venture capital arm of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, did something surprising. It published a list of dozens of American venture capital and private equity firms it had partnered with, showing just how widely the kingdom's money was being spread around. Tech, AI, surveillance, media. But the influence purchasing campaign doesn't end in Silicon Valley.
They are taught, if you're poor, you should kill yourself. From birth, they are taught this, okay? As children, as little, impressionable, beautiful, innocent babies. They are taught from birth to jihad against us kafirs with their lives, their words, and their wealth. So if you're rich, you can just pay it. Donate money to a Muslim cause, to an Islamic cause, to a Sharia Law cause, to a ISIS fighter. But if you're poor, you better get out there on the battlefield and give up your life, your entire life, for Allah.